Welcome to Mining Over Canada. Join the Canadian Securities Exchange and our partners in a first-hand look into our country's vast mining landscape.
Hi, it's Phillip Shum from the CSC. I'm the Director of Listings Development here. Today I'm happy to be with Siri Genik, who is the founder of a Bridge. We are talking about the ABCs of ESG today. She's a specialist that is very much focused in this, so we're extremely excited to hear all about this today. Welcome, Siri.
Phil, thank you. Welcome, and thank you for extending the invitation to you, to the CSC team. It's always a pleasure to talk about what I'm passionate about. A little bit about myself and Bridge. So, no secret, I'm a lawyer, have been for 30 years. And ESG wasn't even on anybody's radar screen at the time. Worked through, was a partner at a major Canadian law firm, and then joined a major engineering and construction company, not as a lawyer. And I wanted to learn about projects and understand the risks. So I'm not technical. I mean, I have an MBA, I have knowledge in finance, etc. I'm not an engineer or geologist, but I love the process of building something and also understanding the risks around projects and what can actually affect them and prevent them from actually coming to life, or affecting operations or their shareholders and the people that are part of them. Had some great mentors, worked with incredible project directors, was fortunate to work with the likes of Xstrata, today Glencore, Xstrata, BHP, Suncor, and about 8 years ago, decided I'd bring together all my experiences, or most of my experiences, my skill sets, and work in the space of project risk management for what at the time was called non-quantitative risk. So risk was often either financial or legal. And the other concerns, at the time called soft, were not necessarily tracked as concerns that could affect the bottom line. I believed otherwise, and I had seen differently. And so I decided to build a consultancy around what I thought were soft issues, but had a hard effect on dollars. So when I started 8 years ago, I called the company Bridge exactly for that reason, linking ideas with reality. What are those ideas and how do you pragmatically turn them into results for your bottom line? In the natural resource industry, so mining, oil and gas, but also infrastructure. So I've worked with the Port of Montreal, Hydro-Quebec. The concepts remain the same. ESG, as you mentioned, is an acronym and one of an alphabet. So the choice of title is excellent, ABCs of ESG. It started off as H&S, which was health and safety. It became HSE, health and safety and environment. It became HSEC, so health, safety, environment and community. And then it was CSR. And then it was ESG. And I would almost add one more. It's not very elegant, but WTF. I mean, you're in the mining business. It's not very ladylike. It's my miner's mouth. But I was sitting on the other end going, of course people don't understand. Every time you get comfortable in the space, it evolves. So part of today is very much evolution with COVID-19. Everything has changed literally overnight. COVID-19 has kicked the ESG, and you see it everywhere. It's hard to have a mining conference or any kind of a conference without that acronym. When you throw into the mix the acronyms around the metrics, so SASB, MCSI, TCFD, SDG, GRI, I mean, you're just like, forget it. Do I need to go back to school and learn how to spell? And that's a bit unfortunate. ESG is really all about stewardship. ESG stands for environment, sustainability, and governance. And those are today the three driving factors that couch the project development and business operations. That didn't exist. I would say, I should catch myself. It has always been important for mining to be a good business partner, a good corporate citizen. What that meant was a whole different debate. Of course, you need a great asset, or as good an asset as you can, not too remote, not too deep, not too difficult, geopolitically safe, the long list of risks around management. But more and more, the world is concerned about carbon footprint, about the people, and about how it affects the future of our planet. And they seem like very lofty goals and maybe a little bit fluffy in an industry that's hard rock. I mean, my dad was a geologist. I know it's like, if the gold isn't there, it doesn't matter. Fair enough. The problem is that if you don't get the financing for that gold or that oil and gas, or to build that energy plant, it's going to stay in the ground or stay on an architect's drawing board. So ESG, if we take the acronym away, I think a more comfortable word that we could work with is stewardship. And so it goes mostly to the G in the ESG, good governance. And it means there are two groups of people in this thought process. You have the asset owners, so the gold mining companies of all sizes, from the Rios to the juniors, and you have the investors. I don't like to say on the other side, because it should not be them and us. It should be together.
Absolutely.
And you go from institutional to retail to the banks, and so what stewardship means is, from an own assets perspective, I have a business model that is concerned with my shareholder value, with making profit, but I follow policy, I follow guidelines by the government, but I also have a purpose. Word that you're going to be hearing a lot of also in the upcoming years, I believe. And so another one for the MELI of sustainability and stewardship. So what does that mean to me as a small cap, as a junior? So for a small cap or a junior, it means as simple as having a good board. Maybe not 3 guys or 3 girls who play golf together, but 3 people who are knowledgeable in the field, but bring different skill sets to the table.
Right.
It could be male, female. It's not just gender related. Absolutely not. It's knowledge. It's all the different aspects of the industry.
Good.
And if you're a small company, it can be 3 people. It could also mean that the people on the board and in the leadership team, even if it's small, don't each make $100 million a year. So there has to be a relationship about what's going on with the company and the role. It also means that you understand the environment, and I mean environment with a capital E, so the landscape in which you're functioning. Are you in the far north? Are you in the Arctic? Are you in Africa? Who are the communities? But also be aware of your stakeholders. And amongst your stakeholders, we can't forget our investors. Important. So what are the investors looking for in this ESG equation or algorithm, depending on the day? They want to make sure at the end of the day that they get a return on their investment and that their reputation is protected. So we'll go into some examples later on, but I want to know that if I'm lending you $10, I will get increasing amounts, my $10 plus. But I also want to know that I won't get my egg all over my face because you may have dumped into a water table, you have maybe not hired locally, or you may be using tier 1 suppliers when you could be perhaps using suppliers on the ground, or maybe not paying your suppliers. And this starts as early as drilling and goes all the way through until closure. So if we conclude this part, we're talking about stewardship. And for it to be successful, regardless of the size, you're going to think of your bottom line. So where profit, purpose, and policy come together and in harmony. So your investor's happy, you understand what your stakeholder's looking for. The stakeholder's happy because he sees you're working hard, you have a good team, a good leadership,
Right.
your reputation is solid. And the government, the policy side, you're following the guidelines, the consultation, the information on the biodiversity, what have you. So that is a bit of a big picture of what ESG is.
Yeah, and certainly this whole concept of stewardship, as you were talking about, when it really comes down to it, it's as you'd mentioned, there are multiple stakeholders, there are different aspects which are involved here, but ultimately, when it really comes down to it, it's really important to be able to run a good company, and I'm doing air quotes good company because there's many ways of looking at what the definition of good is, but really, and the importance of doing all of that is quite paramount. But really, if you were to enunciate that to a CEO, what would you say is the most important facets of ESG and why you should do it?
It's the survival of your organization. It is the ability to carry you through crises. So if you look at COVID, if you're not agile, if you're not able to look after your own employees as you go through COVID,
Mm-hmm.
if people are not treated in a way that they feel empowered and involved, if they feel that their leadership doesn't care, you'll lose them. And you can't really run even a very tiny mining company without your team. It means you have a long-term vision. It means you're able to not just look at the next quarter, but to look at what it's going to look like when you come out of that storm, or how do you go through that storm. So you need to be agile. You need to have a long-term vision. You have to look at your value chain, understand your business from the bottom up and the top down. So again, even if you're in early days of drilling, understand who are your suppliers. Are they people that need help? Are they part of your ecosystem?
Mm-hmm.
If you don't build trust, if you don't build respect, and if you're not transparent, whether it's your internal stakeholders, which are your employees, or your external stakeholders, which can be community, government, even local businessmen, you won't last very long. You won't make it to that third or fourth quarter because nobody will want to do business. And your reputation, especially with social media today,
Mm-hmm.
you know it much better than I do. In real time, you can destroy your reputation. You can go to bed one night thinking you're great, next morning the world has collapsed.
Yeah.
And like I said, we'll get into examples in a bit, but you just need to be responsible. You need to think empathetically from a business perspective. So you need to understand the business. This is about hard dollars and making sure that the people that have trusted you with their investments are going to see a return. So that means acting, so stewardship as a good corporate citizen. And what does that mean? So you treat your employees and you respect them well.
Mm-hmm.
You make sure you understand who's in your supply chain. That's part of the organization's value chain. You're agile. Sometimes you're going to have to change literally on a dime, as we've all had to in the last 6 or 7 months. Things open up, they close down again. We've had to put in different health protocols that slow things down, absolutely. But at the end of the day, people have gotten used to it. Not doing those things, the challenge with stewardship and ESG is if you don't adopt a behavior that's good corporate citizen, you're going to have issues. If you are, you will always attract the trust of your stakeholders, the respect of your ecosystem, and you will be transparent. No bank will fault you for having some difficulties along the way.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not transparent with them, they will lose trust in you.
Right.
The same goes. So it's about, I would say, those 3 words: building trust, building respect, so building relationships, and always being transparent. That's really And I would almost say it's your personal life and your professional. Those are common traits of just good behavior
Yeah,
that
no, absolutely.
translates it to good dollars as well.
Yeah, and when I would say certainly in my personal and professional life, you know, I would say for the most part, what you see personally is actually very similar to what I see professionally for me. So I would hope that someone else on the other side of the table, as you know, we don't want to use that word other side of the table, but the people that you're dealing with, for the most part, also have a similar philosophy in terms of life.
Absolutely.
And if you can, you know, we're all. It's always better to work with people that you like to work with. It just makes life so much easier as well.
Well, when
Uh,
you have to work 24/7, people who are on shifts, people who are in remote areas, that's when it gets really tough. And having done it a number of times when you're tired and you're cold or you're hot or you're exasperated, these things make a difference. And so you are one team. I mean, and mining brings a lot of really incredible things to our environment, to our economy, and environment as well,
mhm.
but to the people that are part of it. So the better we are, and again, it's not about motherhood and apple pie, and it's really about good people drive good teams and drive good results, and that has been consistent. There's data. I don't have the data with me, but there is consistent data out there that strong leadership, strong vision, empathy will drive strong bottom line results.
Right.
And of course, you definitely need the asset. I mean, you can't muck about with what's in the ground, but that will never be, it will no longer be enough. Let me
Yes.
put it to
Yes.
you that way.
Well, that's great to know. So I also wanted to bring up one facet. In many ways, a lot of people may confuse ESG with CSR. And I
Yeah,
wanted to see if you could maybe elaborate about the respective differences.
sure. Well, it's another acronym in the alphabet soup. So CSR is corporate social responsibility. And if you had a diagram, corporate social responsibility would fall under ESG is the framework within which you structure your organization. Within that, you're going to give your different teams and your different departments roles and responsibilities to roll out that environmental, social, and governance framework. Corporate social responsibility is one of those areas
Okay.
that will then transform into actions, what on the ground, where the S part, if you will, how do we translate that corporate vision from the top, from the leaders, to being on boots on the ground. So it can mean a million things, but it is a very important component. So sometimes you hear SLO, another acronym, social license to operate. It's about building those partnerships, those relationships with people on the ground, again, as corporate citizens, so that when you work with the government, you go through the consulting process, and you're going to be there for a while, you actually structure partnerships and build it into your model, so that when it moves back up to the top, then you've got something to deliver. So it is one of the very important parts of ESG, but they absolutely are, people mix them up. And in the evolution, we started with health and safety, and we went through those acronyms. CSR was the latest one before ESG. Now in the business, we really talk about either sustainability or stewardship, to get rid of a lot of acronyms and to work with something that's more perhaps generic, but it
Mhm.
means something different for every organization. So you tailor it. There's no silver bullet. You work with what your business vision is and what are the issues that are material to delivering that business model. And you'll find very quickly that the business vision or the business model and some of those material issues are around the environment, your process plants, your tailing ponds, et cetera, et cetera. So that very naturally they will come together.
So you've worked for various large firms in the past, and how are many of these organizations structured? I suspect based off what you just said that you have like an ESG is really more of a strategy, so to speak, for lack of
Correct.
a term, and then CSR is one component, as you'd mentioned. But how does that get integrated, or what does that look like from an org chart standpoint?
Oh my goodness, if I had the answer to that question, I'd be a trillionaire. It's evolving. So the challenge has been that up until relatively recently, concepts around sustainability were parked in a department. So you had HR, you had legal, you had CSR, and there was somewhere down that hallway. And then you had, of course, the business units. And so a lot of silos, and CSR, but ESG needs to flow. It needs to be cross-functional. If you were drawing a matrix, it would be cross-functional. It has to filter through everything, through HR, through legal, through health and safety, but through design and engineering. So when you start drawing, when you finally get to the point where you've got enough money to start digging,
Mhm.
they also ask you for a closure bond, and everybody's always like, well, why? And it's getting heftier and heftier,
Mhm.
even for the really small, the juniors. The reason is that there are expectations that when this organization leaves, you will have created the least impact possible. And if you don't, that money serves to remediate. So a better approach is, why don't I reverse engineer the solution? Why don't I look at what I want this site to look like when I leave? I'm mining company, I'm a junior. This is how I want it: green fields and cornflowers and beautiful playgrounds and all that kind of nice.
Mhm.
So how do I reverse engineer it to
That's actually a really
design the
great idea.
proper,
Yeah.
to get the right pro? Will it be more expensive up front? Probably, or
Mhm.
most possibly. But as you work your way through the permitting process, through the consulting, through the approvals, you will find you have buy-in. And if you work with your stakeholders, you're both the investors, so you share with them the challenges, as well as the communities and the unions and the governments. Now you have a bunch of partnerships, not a bunch of people that are beating you up.
Mhm.
So often it's, again, just like human relationships. The more you talk to people, the more, and I certainly learned that in my career as a lawyer. I moved to certify as a mediator, because the concept of, I was a litigator, of me versus you, even when you're the winner,
Mhm.
you don't win anything. It's a personal view. It's my view as a lawyer. Very proud to be a lawyer, by the way. But as a mediator, you sit everybody around that round table, and there has to be something in it for everybody. And it doesn't cost money to talk to people.
Mhm.
So it's understanding what those issues are, and again, putting them on a diagram and mapping them out in a risk a risk diagram, and saying, what are they? And they move. So you have to be on top of them. But it's not, and I mean this very respectfully, it's not rocket science. It's just part of doing business that is upfront less expensive, to talk to people, to understand what concerns are, what needs are. It's not always simple. Geopolitically, it can be a challenge, but being aware of them is part of managing the risk.
Mhm.
Not addressing them when you know they're there is poor risk mitigation.
No,
So
I love that concept about retrofitting, or rather working
reverse
backward,
engineering, yeah.
reverse engineering, or
It works really. I've worked on it with clients, and I've worked with big guys, but my clients now are more mid tiers and small and junior,
Mhm.
and it works really well. A whiteboard, a diagram, and we talk it through. And there's some solutions today are amazing.
Yeah.
And then communicating them, of
Yeah,
course.
and we've talked in this discussion about like why it's important, what are the acronyms, but ultimately, the whole one of the purposes of this video is to make sure that we're educating individuals about why the importance of ESG. But so walk me through a scenario, or rather examples or reasons why people should do it, and ultimately, what's the effect if you don't do it?
So I'll take two extreme examples, but they're public and they're very obvious. So, and to the point where a few of my clients or some of the juniors will say, well, look, this is all great, Siri, but I don't have the money in the teams to do all this stuff. So a very recent example, very unfortunate, that happened in September is the explosion of the Yukon Gorge caves by Rio Tinto, 46 million old, 46 million year old caves. Just incredible history. I've worked in that area. They're incredible.
Where
in Australia, so in the Pilbara.
Okay.
In Northwest Australia. So Pilbara, pure iron ore country. It's and it wasn't that they didn't have all the bells and whistles. They had tools, they had reports, they had all the CSR teams. The challenge there was what we talked about earlier. There was no tie-in, I believe, to the top, to the leadership. There was no, or the perception that we have anyway. We'll never know what happened. I wasn't at Rio at the time, and I wasn't part of that decision-making process. But from the outside and from what we hear is that what went from the top down never came back up to the top. So there was a lot of issues structurally and organizationally that are currently being addressed and fixed. So it's important in an organization, regardless of the size, to talk to each other. Mm-hmm. So that the permit department talks to the communications department, that talks to the engineering department, and that you make sure that work your way to the top of the leadership. That was a dramatic example. It's a sad example. And it's obviously all over the place. And so to those people who say, well, I don't have enough money, they had everything, but yet that stewardship approach, this concern about am I doing as a leader, I think we need to ask ourselves, am I doing the right thing? Because I am at the end of the day accountable. So it's that accountability. Mm-hmm. A reason there are many reasons that have not gone well of organizations that have bought or merged with small organizations and geopolitically challenged situations where communities were enraged or not satisfied and no due diligence was done, and eventually the assets had to be abandoned. And there's any number of those. But if you flip that,
assets were abandoned, therefore they
sunk $2 billion. They sunk $2 billion into the ground to buy this asset, and then turned out that there was community issues. And again, an example, but it's very big and complicated. Could be Barrick and Pascual Lama. And I think at this point in time,
right?
No, it's Chile and Argentina. Chile and Argentina. But it is a challenging site geographically, etc. But it at the outset, getting community buy-in, understanding the impact of water. So those are some dramatic examples of when you don't pay enough attention or you don't think it's important. There are many others where people have bought companies in Peru and in Argentina that had issues, in Africa, and thought, well, when we take them over, we'll fix it, and they were unable to. It's hard to build trust when trust is broken.
Yeah,
it's hard to build respect. But there's some really good examples of when even the smaller companies are good corporate citizens, that in an M&A situation or a JV situation, a larger company will go, now the asset is good, geographically it's close, but you know what, they're also doing well. And I'll give you two really, one very recent, one less recent, in fact, three that come to mind is Newmont and Goldcorp. Now they're larger, given, but Newmont and Goldcorp had common sustainability cultures. And Goldcorp has Musselwhite, which is a very attractive Canadian asset for Newmont and is continuing to be. If you look at Kirkland Gold and Detour Gold, the same thing. An Australian company, Detour had um, a very strong approach to corporate sustainability and to just the broader respect, and are very, very liked in the Moose Cree environment. Um, um, the other one is St. Barbara and Atlantic Gold. So St. Barbara again is Australian and bought Nova Scotian Atlantic Gold. The same thing, Atlantic Gold embraces so obviously the asset is good and has promise and its pipeline future, but it also has strong corporate sustainability behavior. The most recent one that I really like, because it talks to the smaller companies that always are worried, rightfully so, is Agnico Eagle and Maple Gold. Now I'm in this space, but I hadn't really. Maple Gold was not on my radar screen. Agnico Eagle certainly is, and Agnico are known, along with Newmont, to be right at the top of those mining companies that embrace ESG. That is part of their framework. That is how they do business. So I know for a fact that Agnico has it. They have a checklist, obviously, when they do their due diligence. The whole sustainability and stewardship component is absolutely vital. If an asset doesn't have that, they won't even consider it.
Wow. Okay.
So very recently, Agnico and Maple Gold JV'd. I think it was last week, maybe 2 weeks ago. But the value of the stock of Maple's just shot it right up, and they're doing well. And they're, sorry, you were going to say?
No, and that's an interesting facet, because ultimately, I think when it comes down to it, if you don't do the right things with ESG, it's going to cost you ultimately. And it could, you mentioned sinking $2 billion into a property and then it having to
walking away.
But on the flip side, if you do it right, you can get bought out, or you can merge with a larger
or it's starting. So there is no, that I know of, and I stand to be corrected, direct relationship to date between a strong ESG framework and attracting the equal number of dollars. So, but the bank, everybody now is looking at it, is considering it. The institutional investors absolutely are. They're all members of the principles of PRI, which are the principles of responsible investment.
Mm-hmm.
They subscribe to all of these important requirements. And so even if you're small, if you don't adopt, and it doesn't mean you have to have a report. So that's one myth I'd like to debunk on this platform, is it doesn't mean you have to have a glossy report with lots of results around SDGs and GRIs, and again this terminology. I help clients work with an Excel spreadsheet, and I tell them, pick 2 or 3 things that are really material. It could be concern around polluting water, concern about providing local employment, and that can be it. Identify it on an Excel spreadsheet and track it. How are you doing? Where can you do better? That is as much a report as the very fancy ones. And like I said, there are many, Vale had the Brazil tailing dams disaster. They have reports coming out of the yin yang. So does Rio. So at the end of the day, you have to live your results. You have to be your results.
Mm-hmm.
It's more than just a report.
Mm-hmm.
So when you get a report, you can say, yeah, no, we changed our process for this approach, for this gold, because we knew it was going to pollute the water table, or our tailings have been moved. So there is a story. Mm-hmm. that you can talk to your investor and understand what your investor is looking for. And now you're building a relationship mm-hmm. for the long term.
Yeah.
Because reputation can be killed in an instant, as we know. But what in our business, if it's good, it'll last you in good stead for a long time. And that's what we're looking for. It's managing, at the end of the day, your reputational risk, regardless of what you've got in the ground and how good it is.
Right. And when you said long-term relationships, that means trust and engendering trust by actually living it, exactly. And doing what you say you're going to do.
And so respect.
Yeah, and so this has been extremely interesting. I very much appreciate you for your time and your expertise with everything. How does one keep abreast of getting in touch with you, or how do people figure out how to
So
get in touch with you?
thank you for asking, Phil. They can go to my website, so www.bridgeconsults.ca, or go through LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn, or even through yourself, and you can forward the questions. Just if people need help or just some thoughts, I am happy to talk to them. I mean, it it's not to get discouraged, not to think it has to be a huge report or lots. It's more about starting small but starting right, and understanding what your business model is.
Mhm.
And with that, we can build a foundation that is attractive to everybody, and at the end of the day, makes your shareholders happy.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I want to thank you again. Once again, it's Phillip Shum from the CSC. I'm the Listings Development Director here in Toronto, Canada. I'm here with Siri Genik. That's Genik if you're looking for her on LinkedIn. And so thank you very much. This wraps up another video for Mining Over Canada. And certainly for other types of Mining Over Canada videos, please subscribe to CSC TV. Once again, thank you very much, Siri.
Thank you, Philip, and have a nice day, everybody. Thank you.